Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Very good evening and welcome to another edition of Health Matters. I'm Khawa Solomon. It's an absolute pleasure having you with us. Please do stay with us up until the next hour and note that any of the Health Matters shows that you have missed, you can visit YouTube and check out ITV Network's Health Matters. Lots of medical topical issues as well as social as well. I mean, last week we covered the one of what's corporate wellness, what's happening in and around your business and your work. This week specifically, we will be profiling a little bit about the biggest children's hospital in Africa. And also we have the CEO of the Hospital Trust with us today. So unpacking specifically one of the most common cases that comes through the hospital, and that is child abuse. But let's watch this video and see a little bit more about the Red Cross Children's War Memorial Hospital.
I'll be watching you. I'll be watching you. Hold your guard, show me where the do. Feel the heart, make it better.
I won't lie, I just got some cold shivers, them saying they live because we give, and you'll find out exactly how you can give and be part of the Red Cross Children's Hospital and everything that happens in a few minutes. But we will welcome our guest now, of course, our in-studio medical doctor, Dr. Shaida Umar, Clinical Director of the Red Cross, of the Teddy Bear Foundation, and dealing with this topic of discussion very much so. Welcome and assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
And we have the CEO of the Children's Hospital Trust with us, Chantal Cooper. Thank you so much for flying down from the beautiful mother city, coming to this bustling
It's good
Johannesburg.
to be in Johannesburg.
Hey, different.
It is amazing.
Absolutely. And Dr. Umar, firstly, we'd like to give the platform to you to give us just a brief introduction on today's topic, child abuse ER cases that we'll be chatting and unpacking.
And Shukran, thank you so much for this great opportunity. I think this is very close to my heart. It's something that I've been working with for over 25 years.
Yeah.
So firstly, I would just like to also just quickly take an extract from the Holy Quran, which speaks specifically to the rights of parents towards their children, the rights and responsibilities of parents and the rights and responsibilities of children. Now, what's interesting is that having glossed through certain verses, we are speaking about the African Charter on the Rights of Children, the Hague Convention, and all sorts of international instruments that we as a nation, as a country, have to abide and adhere to. What is interesting is that the Quran has been speaking about this forever, for infinity, talking about parents' rights, ensuring that children are given the opportunity, the optimal structures and environment to grow and develop, and speaks specifically to physical abuse, where any kind of affliction or infliction of a form of violence that leaves a spot or a mark on the child is totally unacceptable and constitutes abuse. And today in South Africa, we are still actually discussing the abolishment of corporal punishment at home, and we are waiting to hear any day now about the decision of the Constitutional Court regarding this. Schools have adopted this a long time ago about abolishing corporal punishment, but I just feel that the Quran is a living testament to what we are facing and challenged with in terms of children's situations and circumstances, where children are the most marginalized population group and of course are the most vulnerable. And I think we have none other than Charlene here specifically to speak to that. And we know that at least 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 4 boys before the age of 10 are victims of one or other form of abuse.
Yeah, and Teddy Bear Foundation deals with these cases on a daily basis more than the stats that you guys hear. And we know that this is just cases that has come in by your door and been reported. How many others are not? Absolutely. So just quickly let us know who this beautiful structure you represent, the Red Cross Children's Trust, as well as the Red Cross Children's War Memorial Hospital.
Okay, so I'll start with the Red Cross Children's Hospital. So established in 1956. It's a really interesting history that goes back to World War II, where at the time people realized that they wanted to create a better future for children. And they did that in memory of those who died during World War II. So in 1994, the equipment wasn't all that they needed. The building was falling apart. We had incredible doctors and staff, and we still do. And at the time, they realized, that there was only so much government could provide, because the hospital is a government hospital. And they went out and spoke to a couple of people and said, come, we need to continue creating a better future for our children. They got together and created a non-profit organization called the Children's Hospital Trust. And we've been going for 25 years, and we've raised funds for hospitals and partners. So it really is an expanded mandate to ensure that every single child has access to the best healthcare possible. Absolutely. And I think the important thing to realize is not just about Cape Town. It is about ensuring that every child in Africa has access to healthcare. And we'll hear Sam's story, and Sam lives in Johannesburg.
Absolutely. Yeah, Sam is waiting patiently. We'll get to Sam and his mom a little bit later on, and also talk about the rest of the ambassadors that represent in this link. And when you said to me, when I said to you, let's do a topical medical, discussion, and when you said to me, listen, we're going to be discussing the most common cases that come in here, and I was absolutely shocked and blown away when I heard that it's actually child abuse cases. So could we quickly unpack that and why you guys are extending your emergency units?
So I think what many people don't realize is that the hospital is so much more than just medical intervention and medical care. We have a group of incredible social workers who provide the social work care within the hospital. And they raised their voices and they put their hands up a couple of months ago, because part of the project that we're raising funds for is our emergency centre. So we're expanding and upgrading. But they've raised their hand and said, we want you to know that we're concerned about the number of children who are coming through the hospital who've experienced some form of child abuse. Now, you must remember, being a tertiary hospital, that a child that comes through the doors of our emergency centre requires surgery. So that child has experienced an extreme form of child abuse. And it could range from physical abuse that you mentioned earlier, sexual abuse, but child abuse can also come in a form of neglect, that a child has been neglected so badly that they need medical intervention. We know in Cape Town at the moment we have serious problems with gang violence, and children are also victims of that. So we're seeing an increase in number of children who've been shot. And so gunshot injuries is now form part of child abuse, because children are used as the victims between the gangs. So, we have joined together with the social workers to say, to raise awareness that we're seeing an increase, and instead of standing on the sidelines, as you mentioned, is that we as a community can actually play a role in terms of providing protection for children in these environments.
So, Dr. Shad, I want to bring you in, and just it just happened to be that when your husband walked in, he talked about his experience knowing that Children's Hospital was there since the 1950s, and I can talk about my experience as well at the Red Cross Children's Hospital. And when I visited Chantal in the week in the hospital, in fact, and looking at the beautiful expansion and the ideas that it's going to go beyond a burns room, a child protection room, a family counseling room, and at the moment, and several others, in fact, separate triage rooms. When you come in, you just have this waiting area, you have an admission, and you go into a room eventually when someone checks you out. So let's just quickly look at what is needed for a ER for a patient that comes in with a possible child abuse case and they walk into the emergency unit?
Well, I think obviously it's always whenever a child comes into ER, it's a medical emergency. So of course, medical attention is of priority, but I think the multidisciplinary approach is critical because we're not just looking at the medical emergency, but we're looking at the holistic wellness and in a more integrated, comprehensive approach to ensuring the well-being of their child and the family, because the child doesn't exist in isolation. Child is not existing in a vacuum. The child is part of a bigger whole, and that system is usually more traumatized because they understand the gravity and the complexities of what their child has gone through and the possible trajectory or the implications of that violation, whether it be physical, and I think we're just talking about the gang violence that children are becoming part of, or even in terms of the domestic violence issues which we are seeing in the Western Cape, but I think across the country and across the globe we often see that, but it has reached pandemic proportions. But coming back to your question, I think the model that has been demonstrated by the Red Cross Memorial Hospital is certainly perfect. It's one of those models that has been refined and fine-tuned for children because it's user-friendly, it's child-friendly. It's looking at containing, the containment. It's not just physical containment, but the emotional containment. Because when a person is in that panic mode or in trauma mode, you know, there's that flight or fright, and of course they cannot actually make sense of what is going on, the confusion, the terror, the fear, and of course if there's this kind of environment that has been provided, it is conducive already. The journey to healing has started, and that plays such a critical role if we're looking at the long-term healing and implications of well-being.
Sure, we're going to discuss that and talk more about your emergency child abuse and ER cases. We have Red Cross Children's Hospital in studio with us. We'll talk more on how you can be part of it back in a moment. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back. Child abuse ER cases. We have the biggest children's hospital in Africa based out in the Western Cape. And let me tell you, even if you're coming out from Johannesburg, Durban, somewhere up in Africa, they, alhamdulillah, the government has organized a housing unit as well for moms and dads to actually stay there with their children. So to add to that, we have the Children's Hospital Trust CEO with us to introduce as well how we as an individual, as in a community, can also be part of bringing about a better children's hospital. So as Dr. Umar mentioned, the sort of support that is needed when an ER case of abuse does walk in, what is the extension going to be? Ben, how is that going to be benefiting the ER cases that does come in?
So, I mean, as the doctor was mentioning earlier, when you're coming into the medical emergency, it is a medical emergency. And it is really about creating a space that is safe, both for the child and for the families. And we don't have what we want at this stage. So that's where the expansion and the upgrade comes into being. What we don't have at the moment is a child protection room. So if you have a child who has experienced sexual abuse, the last thing you want is your family and your child to be sitting amongst the public after what you've just experienced and the trauma of what you're feeling and you're going through. So that child protection
saying
room,
it publicly in front of everybody as well.
100%. So that child protection room becomes vital because it offers that much needed safety, the elements of privacy that a family needs to have a conversation with the clinicians and the nurses. And also important is that the people within that space are going to be specifically trained to provide specialized care for children who've experienced any form of sexual abuse. So in addition to that, you have a child who's come in that has been shot, would go through similar kinds of trauma, but they would need to go into the trauma side. So it is making sure that at every step of the way that the staff have what they need, plus the parents feel that they are in a safe space and that the child is getting the best care possible.
I think I like what Charlene is saying. It's so important that often we gloss over the primary caregivers or the significant others, because if they are contained and if they feel supported, it's going to really catapult the child into a space of containment, feeling okay. Because if the child sees that the parents are okay, are able to manage or deal with this, then the child will feel, okay, it's not so bad. There's a lot of hope that is instilled. And I think that is critical in any ER setting. But also the issue around the child protection room. Remember, the child has already been violated, the invasion, intrusion into a space where nobody's actually allowed or nobody should actually go into. The most gross and heinous crime has been committed against that child. So therefore, that child needs to be given a space where it is more, not only private, contained, supportive, nurturing, and enabling the child, that it's okay to feel the way you are, and what has happened, we will contain that within this space to make you feel safe. Because the child, you know, the feelings and emotions that the child experiences, that fear is generalized to every situation, every setting, and we need to contain that.
Let's talk quickly about the expansion and when it's starting, when it will be completed. So people can be thinking, okay, so tomorrow when I go and I have a certain case that goes through the ER, this is what I'm going to be experiencing. So let's talk about time frame and what is currently happening.
So it's a 3-year building program that started in April. So we're really at the beginning stages. So our ER is functioning as a normal emergency unit while the building is happening. So keep in mind how the staff are feeling at the moment in terms of trying to keep a clinical unit operational while the building's going on. But we know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. So you can see there.
So this is in the front section and emergency is just there at the entrance there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So essentially, the upgrade is really provide the specialized focus. So, you know, abuse, this year we've seen about 20 to 30 number of children who've come in as a result of deliberate burns. So people putting hot water onto their children. So it's also a form of child abuse. So in that case, when they come into the new emergency unit, they'll have a specialized burns unit. So all the equipment is there. So it's not only managing the trauma of what they've just experienced, but making sure that they experience as little pain as possible. So stabilized and moved up. So child protection room, you've mentioned quite a few of the expansion elements earlier, but it's really about family space, child friendly space.
So we have the family counselling room, a lift from the EC to your theatres.
Big missing element at the moment. So it can take a child 8 minutes.
So when that gunshot child comes in, immediately goes to...
And time is of essence. And so also if you have a child who's had a gunshot in the spine, the movement is really important. So the longer time you have to take to get into theatres, the more dangerous it is for a child. So we're going to have a lift that goes straight up to the theatres and will cut the time to 2 to 3 minutes.
Okay, and I see medical and trauma resuscitation closer to each other. Improved staff and teaching facilities. You are a teaching hospital as well as a separate triage room. So that all of these are not current at the hospital now.
No. So it's an incredible unit, and I think it was upgraded around 15 years ago. But, you know, as we grow as a country, we have more children coming into the unit. And so we've really outgrown the unit in terms of the number of children, but also it's not just a child coming in with one thing anymore. There's various elements coming in, which includes the social elements of a child that comes through an emergency
You're raising
center.
such a valuable point, because if we just look at the diversity and the multifaceted problematic areas that we're looking at socioeconomic conditions. We're also looking at structural drivers of violence, the unemployment, the poverty, the substance abuse, the extreme impoverished conditions under which families have to live and are forced to live, and what drives the violence or reduces them to the kind of behaviors that we are seeing as the outcome. It's input, output, but the outcomes that we actually see are where children become casualties, and sometimes the fatalities that we are seeing, because on average 2 to 3 children are murdered a day across the country. The homicides that we are faced with. So I think these things have to be addressed, and what Charlene said very much earlier is, of course, having a hospital or a facility of this nature and of this stature is absolutely brilliant. But she mentioned about awareness raising, and I think we are just seeing the symptoms of a more systemic issue which is prevalent in this country, and which are the structural drivers of violence against children, and that is something that needs to be addressed. Awareness raising is something that will impact if it's done in the correct way.
So, Dr. Umar, relating to, sort of a counselling, separate protection, child protection, family counselling unit that they will have there separately, what work would the Teddy Bear Foundation now be then associated, or even still, with the Red Cross Hospital when they do come in with abuse cases and they need to act on your services?
So, I think if a child... we're based in Gauteng. We are expanding. We are actually expanding into 5 provinces, and the Western Cape is one of them. But I think our scope of services would be limited, not to the extent that the Red Cross. So, of course, we would be referring children who would require ER support, the emergency rescue. I think that would be something that we would lean on heavily for that kind of immediate intervention and attention for children requiring that kind of support.
So I want to quickly, we've got 2 minutes to an ad break, but just quickly want to touch on your ambassador quickly. One of your ambassadors, Mujahid, he is a child abuse case. Many years ago, he was kidnapped by his nanny. Boiling water was thrown on him. I wish he was here today to tell his story, but we've got Sam here from Johannesburg. But him being a child abuse case today, he's, like they say, groot, fris en gezond. He is a R&B artist apparently, and he
doing really well.
If he wasn't around to be doing that, he wouldn't have been your ambassador here today. 100%. So your help, the hospital, the work that the hospital did for him today has allowed him to now represent.
But can I also just add that he's also here today because his mother didn't give up in finding him. And so it's just going back to the value of what you were saying earlier, the role of families and the values that we have.
And I think, just to add to what Charlene says, I think people need to realize and understand that it's not a moral obligation, it's a legal obligation. They need to move beyond the fact that if I tell or if I report this, I'm going to be in deep waters, or there's fear of reprisal or getting into trouble. I think the important thing is failure to report constitutes a criminal offense. Child abuse is a criminal offense, and we cannot overlook this. We need to make it our business. Be it your child or my child. Absolutely. Everybody else's child is our child.
Quickly, before we take our break, Chantal, we will be now moving guests, and we'll be chatting to Sam and Anastasia. Just quickly give us an introduction to who they are.
Well, Sam is 17 years old now, and I think Anastasia and Sam can give you the detail. But he's an incredible young man, and I think Anastasia as a mom has an incredible story. So I reflected earlier on the value of Mujahid's mom. Anastasia is another example of that. But also, they were talking, so the doctors that operated on Sam are still at the hospital today, and they're still on WhatsApp. And that just tells you the commitment that the hospital hospitals, that the doctors in our hospital have, is that it's not just a child, it's just not another number.
Yeah.
It's that they have a personal connection to their patients.
Absolutely. We'll chat to Chantal, Dr. Umbar, just after we interview Sam and his mom and their incredible story, all under the roof of the Red Cross Children's Hospital. Remember, we're chatting about child abuse and ER cases more just after this. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Very good day and welcome back. Remember, you can catch any of the Health Matters show on our YouTube channel, Highlights Health Matters, ITV Networks, and we've got hundreds of shows there. So very topical, and is there anything specific medically that you want to chat about or social, that is on that page. We say a big thank you to the IMA of South Africa as well for participating in the production of the shows. I'm Khawa Solomon, and we've got about, half an hour or so to cover the rest of Red Cross Children's Hospital and their ER cases, which is actually most of it being child abuse. But for now, we're quickly going to cover one of the beautiful stories and the wonderful work that the Red Cross Children's Hospital does with mom and son Sam and Anastasia. Very good day to you guys. Welcome to our studios.
Thank you.
All right, so could we start with you, Anastasia, quickly? Tell us Sam's story. What happened and how did he end up at Red Cross Children's Hospital?
Oh yes, Sam had a disease called biliary atresia. It's the blockage in the bile ducts.
The bile ducts?
Yes.
Okay.
Then I had a friend who was based in Piet Retief, but also had a house in Newcastle.
Okay.
And she noticed that Sam is jaundiced.
Okay.
And she was concerned and she said to
And
me...
how old was Sam?
Sam was about 3 months.
Okay, sure.
And she said there's a good doctor down in Newcastle by the name of Dr. Villani, who trained in Red Cross Hospital. And, I decided, let me travel with Sam and go. And they hosted us. We saw the doctor. And upon seeing him, he said, this child has got a liver failure. And he then explained to me what's going to happen. But he said there's only one place where he can get help, which is Red Cross Hospital. And he told us the whole procedure. And he said, if you are there on time, you can be put on the list, on the waiting list, and wait for the donor. So, yes.
Okay, so this was at 3 months old.
Yes.
You guys traveled with your little baby, your newborn, all the way to Cape Town with Sam. Of course, Sam, you can't remember what happened.
Yeah.
But when your mom tells you the story, how does it make you feel?
It makes me want to raise an awareness of such, because you find that in most shows or TV productions, such things, they do not capture them the way as they are.
Yeah.
Mostly liver patients, you'll find that in certain shows they'll only find a solution very quickly.
Yeah.
Whereas it's not such an ordeal and it's not simple. So being that, I would like to have an opportunity to tell people that, when you have a situation such as an organ donor or an organ transplant situation, you need to meet the required standards. It's not just a basic situation,
So are you still receiving treatment after, having that, is it a liver transplant?
Yes.
All those years ago, what is your condition like now?
Well, normally it's ups and downs, but it's better than before.
Right.
And I rarely get sick. I still take my medication. Yeah.
So talk to us about your experience at the Red Cross Children's Hospital, Anastasia. You got there, he was 3 months old. You went on the list. Did you immediately decide to go to Cape Town when he was on the list or when he was able to get a donor?
Yes, immediately from Newcastle, I drove to Joburg. I took a bus to Cape Town.
Okay.
And when we arrived there, there's a team of doctors.
Yeah.
Normally they do their rounds at certain times, morning, during the day and evening. And I came with Sam, I presented my case. And I told them that I'm being referred by a doctor from Newcastle, but I didn't have a referral letter.
Yeah.
So immediately, I was so fortunate that when we arrived, it was about 12 midday, and it was the time that they were doing rounds.
Okay.
And they immediately listened to me, and they admitted him. So, upon admission, I thought it's an overnight thing. I thought there's organs that are waiting for us. I'm just going to go there, do the transplant.
Okay,
But then I was
sure.
educated, because there's a team of doctors, nurses, people that will accommodate you. Firstly, when you arrive, you go to a hall where all of us from all provinces are accommodated. But after they've diagnosed the baby, then they tell you that it's a long list. With him, he couldn't travel back to Joburg.
Okay.
The way they explain that even the pressure on the aeroplane can even kill him.
Sure.
Then we were accommodated at a place called Nurses' Home. The nurses and doctors, sometimes they take turns if they've got major cases to attend. So we were accommodated there.
Yeah.
Yes. And in the ward, because he sleeps there, for you to give him support and love, they accommodate you with a bed where you sleep, and in the morning then you fold it, then you look after your child.
Okay. And what would you say overall is your message to moms and also the Red Cross Children's Hospital support, whether it's the doctors, the nurses, the trust? What is your message to them?
Oh, when you are diagnosed with such a disease, especially to parents, African people, normally we hide it. We think there's no hope, there's no help. But now, thank God that there's platforms like Google and everything. You check, but when you arrive at Red Cross, the message that I can say, do not leave your child. As much as the doctors would like to attend to your child, but that love, that support, you need to pull together with the doctors and follow the instructions. If you are told, give him medication 12 hourly, meaning 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., follow that. They are always available for any questions. So do not feel bad to ask even the simplest question. They are there to answer each question.
Thank you so much for your time, both to Sam and yourself, Anastasia, for telling us your story. And this is definitely a topic that we will take on Health Matters. And hopefully we will call you guys to tell your story to us once again. Thank you so much. And we have Sam and Anastasia and their story of how Red Cross Children's Hospital housed them all the way from Gauteng, of where they came, where they based, and supported both of them. I mean, Sam was just 3 months old, and Anastasia can still, and looking at sort of the journey that they've gone through and still here today. We'll tell you a little bit later how you can be part of making this happen for many, many other children as well. Stay with us as we unpack the odd cases of Red Cross Children's Hospital more just after this. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back. A very good evening. I'm Khawa Solomon. With me is Red Cross Children's Hospital Trust CEO Chantal Cooper and Clinical Director of the Teddy Bear Foundation, Dr. Shaida Umar. And we are discussing child abuse, which just happens to be, which I was absolutely shocked by, one of the most ER cases at the Red Cross Children's Hospital. We're also profiling the expansion, the great sort of extra, rooms and services they will be having in about 3 years' time at the Red Cross Children's Hospital. And of course, we will want some more information closer to the time. I must say, walking into your ICU is literally like another hospital at Shaida. And when I was there, my son had to have also an emergency operation, and we went into the MRI, X-rays room. When I walked out of the lift from the one section of the hospital to the MRI, I felt like I was in a space station, honestly. So you guys have really improved as well. Your ICU is so state of the art. You showed me one of your incubators, which cost 500,000 rand. Impressive.
Medical equipment is expensive.
And there are donors, individuals and companies, but for me, the individuals and the communities that stand out have actually come together to raise funds. But we're going to talk a little bit more about that closer to the end. Just as we spoke to Sam and Anastasia now, heartwarming story. Mother traveling all the way from Gauteng, KwaZulu-Natal, back to Cape Town to be housed there for, I'm sure, a couple of weeks till her son gets better. Talk to us about some of those cases and how, they are housed with the facilities that you guys have from all over Africa to South Africa for people that does come down.
So I think the core values of the hospital is really, you hear patient-centered care, but actually it's really family-centered care. So it is really, and I mean, you mentioned earlier that a child heals faster if they know that their parents are okay, because children are incredible, but children are also resilient. So it's us as adults who feel the anxiety more than a child does. So taking this into consideration, about 10 years ago, and Anastasia was lucky enough to stay in the nurse's home, but we'd built a parents' accommodation, which is specifically for parents who are from out of Cape Town and cannot afford to stay in private accommodation. So they can stay there and they literally have access to a room, shower, and 3 meals a day. So it's making sure that they are feeling calm while their children is receiving the best medical care possible.
Chantel, what you've alluded to is so important, because if we look at besides the trauma that the child has been facing and whatever injury or whatever surgical procedure the child is there for, containment of the family, preservation of the family unit is so critical, because the separation anxiety, being separated, being inflicted with an injury of whatever shape or form can in itself be so traumatizing and result in secondary victimization if the family is removed from the child, where there's no connection, this disconnect, which would certainly be detrimental and harmful to the healing process.
That's exactly what I was going to latch on. Shada, you just read my mind of how important it is that the closest to that child is there with that child to recover. Anastasia mentioned the bed. I've also had that experience. This beautiful chair that you actually sit on during the day, and it opens up into a bed, and you can be there right next to your child. What that healing process does for that child, as Dr. Shaida just mentioned.
And I think it talks to the value of being in a children's only hospital, because the focus is on how you take care of a child and include the family, where if often we find that in an adult hospital, children get lost in the adult way of thinking. So Anastasia also mentioned that, they were in a room with other families from all over the country, from different provinces. It's the understanding that, you talk through the parents of what's happening with their child every step of the way. So they understand that it's important that the family understands what's going to happen with their child.
Okay, so let's just quickly look at the supports that the hospital currently has, and where all of this donations and the runnings of the hospital for the expansions and the extensions is actually coming from.
So you mentioned the ICU earlier. I think the most exciting thing for me about the ICU, it was a 150 million rand project, was driven by individuals. And that is just the most incredible, and it's South Africans. It's not global, it really is South Africans taking care of their own hospital in South Africa. And the expansion of emergency centre is in a very similar position, is that unfortunately this time round we don't have any financial support from the government. We need to raise 122 million over a period of 3 years, but the good news is that we've raised 70 million already. So do the maths, we still have quite a bit to raise, but we have no doubt that the individuals will support the hospital.
Let's talk about your support of the individuals that does come out, and how much it has affected the hospital. I've seen, as I mentioned, the child abuse case of Mujahid, and him that standing ambassador, getting people together as well. I've heard about a running club, Dr. Shaida. It's amazing. It was a running club or a ladies exercise club or something like that gets together on a monthly or weekly basis. They come together and they raise funds for the...
So I must mention there's two incredible groups, but I must mention it's the we call them the March Ladies. They call themselves the March Ladies, and they have been donating. They arrange an event once a year within the Muslim community, and they have been donating to the hospital for 25 years.
Sure.
Wow. It's an incredible group of women who have remained dedicated to the hospital, and many of their children have been through the hospital, and now their children's children are patients that move through the hospital. So it is really a sense of that the hospital is part of the community and is part of the fabric of society in South Africa.
And I would like to open the platforms for our viewers to call in and tell us a bit about your story. If you had an experience with Red Cross Children's Hospital, their staff, their management, or even just donated a 5 Rand, because let me tell you can just donate a 5 Rand or 30 Rand. And tell us a bit about your story, because I've got one too, a personal one, which I didn't even think would come up. But coming back to sort of the social responsibility that us as individuals, as a community, Dr. Shaida, have upon an organization, an institution like this. I mean, even the Teddy Bear Foundation, I'm sure organizations and NGOs around the world, and specifically South Africa, are possibly run financially by those communities and individuals.
And I think it's the communities that make it happen, because the ambassadors continue. They come in as patients, they come in as victims, totally helpless, hopeless, and at the mercy and beck and call of the hospital facilities, and leave there feeling very much in control, more powerful, stronger, healed or healing. And of course, that in itself impacts on their lives in the ambassadorial role, which then they perpetuate this legacy of continuity, of enabling and providing opportunities for others to have access to that kind of facility and support. And I think that is what communities need to be aware of. And the fact that today it's that family or that child, tomorrow it could be my child. I think the importance of empathy here, to be sensitive to the needs of any child, any family out there, because we all could need that kind of service at any point in one's life.
Talking about family and dad specifically, we've got a special video by a little one that's not with us anymore, Dennis, and he had put together his words, and we'd like to play this short clip of a father who stands out and calls out to you. He's lost a little one by just a puddle of water. What was it? A bucket of water. He drowned during the drought in Cape Town. We had buckets and buckets and bottles everywhere. So this little one actually drowned in a bucket of water. Let's hear what Dennis has to say. Watch this.
Our son Connor fell into a bucket of water that we were using through the drought, and he drowned. We spent 5 days in the ICU with the staff at this fine institution. Connor unfortunately passed away. The doctors and the nurses and everyone were unbelievable. They cried with us, they prayed with us, and that's why an institution like this needs your help. Please open your hearts and open your wallet and leave your mark on life.
Leave your mark on a life, and a child is ours. It's the entire community. It's not just mine. We don't live in isolation. We're going to tell the viewers how they can leave their mark by SMSing to a number, and you can donate. I want to just quickly talk about Okona's story. Chantal, tell us a bit about that. And the groundbreaking work that Red Cross does, actually.
Yeah, I think Daniel's story is quite special, that even though Connor had passed away, and I think it's every parent's fear that something's going to happen to your child, but his son fell into a bucket, and when you're 18 months old, you're not strong enough to lift yourself out. And so Connor had been rushed paramedics had rushed him through the emergency center, but Connor had been brain dead when they take him in out of the water, but he was still breathing. So as a father, you still have the hope that something could be done with your child. And it's quite interesting that at the time I was in the ICU when I saw Daniel with Connor, and I'd spoken, and it's quite ironic because this doctor I'd spoken to is the same doctor that actually was involved with Sam, Professor Mignon McCulloch.
Sure.
And so, you know, they'd said that they've did the brain test and there's no way, and so they had to make the tough decision to switch the machine off. But there's something that Daniel told me that I'll never forget, is that the last night that they were spending with Connor, he was sitting, there was a baby in the incubator next to them, and this little one didn't have a parent with them. But the baby was crying. So the nurse picked the little one up and put it on her chest and sang to the little one. When she put the little one down and she walked away, he started crying. So she spent the night singing to this little one. And I think it's stories like that that the public don't get to hear, because, you know, and I'm sure it happens in all clinical spaces, that the medical staff are so humble, they don't share the extra special things that they do with children. And it's out of this experience that Daniel wants to raise awareness around the incredible work that actually takes place. So when we talk about the expansion of the emergency center, Daniel knows exactly the route. He didn't have a lift to take to the theatre, but he also, it's more than just the building, it's about the people in the building.
But I think you're raising something more than that. It's also, you know, you said about being patient-centered, person-centered, family-centered. It's about the heart. It's not just about the physical setting, the state-of-the-art technology. All of that could be worthless and meaningless. But the connection, this passion, the dedication that this medical nurse actually displayed and demonstrated, where she actually reached out, this connection with that heartbeat, reaching out and putting that
To heal
little
again.
baby on her chest, that rhythmic beat and connection in itself is so powerful and poignant in the response that the little child demonstrated.
So we as a community, me as an individual, us as a family, corporates, we want to know how we can better and grow to see that emergency unit come to where it's several extra rooms to come in for the specialized, even the lift. If one of your family's names can be in that lift to say, my family contributed towards the existence of this lift, so that child could get the emergency service it needed up into the ER. How can people donate?
So I think on the screen it's very simple. You mentioned earlier, it really isn't, it's about the small amounts add up. So the SMS 40465 is an easy way.
40465.
Or to go onto our website, which you'll share just now. It's children'shospitaltrust.org.za, and it really is pressing the red donate button. It's as simple as that. If anybody wants more information,
we can donate via that website.
Yes.
Click
More
on donate.
information, our telephone number is 021 786
786.
Yes.
You're kidding. 021 786?
7860.
Yeah. 7860. I've got it in front of me. So easy number.
The number is on our website.
Okay.
Give us a call and we can provide information and send the information. But we would really appreciate the financial support. We need to meet our targets.
And Dr. Umar, from your side, how can we better child abuse cases as a community? And if we are sitting happening to sit at that emergency room and we actually see a family coming in with a possible child abuse case, whether it be burns, whether it be sexual, physical, emotional, how can we help?
Well, I think that you've asked something so important. I was actually...
Sorry, we have to wrap up.
Yeah, I think it's important not to contaminate any evidence as well, because you actually don't know the context of that.
Yes.
So for people that are concerned and are, wanting to reach out, to actually be aware of that, not to physically reach out, but maybe to observe, take note, and actually make notes, and later on see how best they can support, because not to contaminate any
Sure.
evidence.
Best advice.
That is very critical.
Brilliant advice.
But just be emotionally available, that
Yeah.
I'm here, I'm present, I'm here to support.
Don't invade. Dr. Shaida Omar, Jazakallah again for your time from the Teddy Bear Foundation as well as the Children's Hospital Trust. Chantal and your team as well for putting all of this together. We hope to see you soon, as well as our pledge line during Ramadan, inshallah. And donate generously every day. Thank you so much, and assalamu alaikum to you, Dr. Omar.
Salam.
Until our next show, remember, Red Cross Children's Hospital is there for the rest of Africa. They're the biggest hospital in Africa. Support it generously. Make a few SMSs and donate a few 30 rands and be that support to that next person. Child abuse cases are serious, and let's do something about it. Wassalamu alaikum and goodbye for now.